Hey everyone, my name is Andrés.
I'm Scott.
I'm Abe.
And welcome to the show Between Two Stands, a show that takes a closer look at the personalities that make up the Detroit Symphony Orchestra. And today, in conjunction with the release of our 2021 concert program schedule, we thought it would be a great idea to bring in a special guest, Vice President and General Manager Erik Rönmark. So, Erik, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's great.
Welcome.
Thanks.
So we have a question that we always start out each show with, and that is, what is on your stand right now? So,
Well,
what is on my stand? You know, my music stand in the basement is fairly empty now. I have to dust it off and start practicing. I was telling myself early on I should probably take advantage of practicing a little bit more now that I have the time. And then I realized there was very little time that I had during these
Yeah.
five plus months.
yeah.
well, not too long ago, we had the interview with your wife, Adrienne, and we mentioned that she was married to you and that you're a saxophone player and everything else.
Yeah.
So, but what else has been, like, maybe not on your stand but on your plate for the recent time?
Yeah, I mean it's been sort of crazy, trying to figure out exactly what we were able to do. I keep saying that when you when you plan a season, normally I almost say it's like paint by numbers, because you have sort of like a grid outline of what a season looks like, and you can be very creative within that space, and you can come up with some interesting programs. But what was so unusual about all of this was that it was almost like you had a blank canvas, and there was actually no end to the canvas, because you didn't know what were you able to do. What are you allowed to do? Were you going to be able to do concerts? Were you going to be able to have audiences? How many musicians were you going to have on stage? All these things that in a normal season are not. It's not no red tape around that, and so it becomes complex very fast. So you had to sort of like figure out all these things in order before you even started. So people want to know right away, what are you going to do? And I said, it's almost like the last layer on this very, very tall cake.
Yeah.
Like we have to figure out all these other things first. The boring stuff, the budgets and the regulations and and then of course the safety, all these different things. And then towards the end you can say, now with all of that, here's what we can imagine we can do, because what we knew was that we couldn't do what we had originally planned to do this fall, so we had to at least figure out something that we could do. But that becomes sort of the work of the last 4 or 5 weeks, which was a little intense.
Right.
And
So you're planning this in 4 or 5 weeks, but then in a normal circumstance, aren't you planning 2 or 3 years out?
Yeah, I mean, orchestras plan quite far in advance, so because of how we announce, right? So normally we announce, the 2021 season was announced this past January. But that means that season really has to be completed that fall, the fall of 19. And in order for all that to line up, you really start working backwards. So that season, normally you are looking ahead 1, 2, sometimes 3 years when you plan. And now all of a sudden, all of this comes sort of crashing down to, a period of 4 to 5 weeks. It's
That's crazy.
I feel like I've seen a lot in my time here at the DSO, but this was like nothing else.
Yeah. I bet you haven't been busy at all, right, Erik? So maybe for everyone watching, you kind of touched on it a little bit, but can you explain for the viewers what a general manager's role is in the orchestra and what that entails?
Yeah, every orchestra is a little bit different on how they're structured from a staff point, but I would say, in general terms, the general manager oversees the orchestra operations. In any orchestra, they're sort of in charge of everything that's happened on stage, whether it's the stage hands or the personnel office, all the operational aspects of it. Making sure that the rehearsals and concerts are scheduled as we can schedule them. Anything that has to do with touring or recordings, sort of all the backstage operational aspects falls under the general manager. Then orchestras differ a little bit. Sometimes the general manager also oversees the artistic department and the education department. It's very common in a lot of orchestras that the general manager will have that overview of the artistic education and orchestra operations side of things. And when I started here, I had to sort of count back, but this is now my 16th season with the symphony, and I started in the music library. I remember, my wife wasn't in the orchestra at the time, but her parents were in the orchestra, and we were up seeing the DSO at Interlaken. And I remember talking to our principal librarian, Robert Stiles, and I was looking for work, and he said, we need some assistance in the music library. So I said, well, if you'll help me, I'll do it. So for the first year here, I did bowings and fixed parts and all that, and then there was an opening in the artistic department. So the general manager at the time hired me over there and sort of worked my way up. But when I took over as general manager, when I took that, because I was doing artistic planning for all this time and still enjoyed doing that, so I have a hard time giving up on the artistic side of thing. And I do think that whole institutional memory and knowledge of a particular orchestra, like the DSO, is so important that even if I could give it up, I don't think I would want to, because you get to know what this orchestra is looking for, both as far as repertoire, but also as you travel and you see guest conductors, you say that person might work with this orchestra. So it's a relationship building industry, and I feel that's what I've been doing. But when I started as a general manager, in the very beginning, I had the artistic operations and education. And then more recently, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I also took over the public relations, so the communication side and the marketing and sales side as well, which I think is fairly unique in our industry. And I think it's very helpful because you sort of get a sense for how you market everything, so that when you start thinking about what you're programming, you have that voice in the back of your mind about how would this program sell? How can we try to sell this differently? How would we talk about this program? But I think even though it's a sort of a wide portfolio, I mean, I couldn't do it if I didn't have just great people who are overseeing those departments, because I'm not the expert on marketing, but I love learning about it, and I have a great team up there that's in charge of it. So
yeah, that's awesome.
So is there anything that you're particularly excited about for this program, because it's such a different program? So
for the fall, you mean?
You're
for the
talking
fall
about
season?
and you're talking about how to market programs. We just announced our season earlier today. So, but I was just wondering, since it was such a condensed process to make it all happen, is there something that sticks out to you?
Well, I mean, I think what's interesting is, when we started looking at, what we could do, you start reaching out to artists, because you have to talk to every single artist and every single artist manager to, find out if they're interested in coming. Are they willing to do a completely different program? Do they have the rep that would be available for us to do it? Would they do it for a reduced fee in some cases? Because we had to make a lot of adjustments for this fall. So when you start looking at like that, it's a short period of time, but once you start going down the line, you get help. You get suggestions from the orchestra, you get suggestions from your colleagues for repertoire, and then you start talking to the conductors and soloists, and you work out and see what their interests are, and all of a sudden your mind opens up to a whole new world of music that we don't often do. because we do larger orchestras, and so chamber orchestra and chamber music is something that we don't do as often. But I mean, there's so many things that I'm excited about. But I think in general, I think it's a very diverse season. And I think we have the opportunity now to really push that the diversity aspect of the composers in a different way. I think this orchestra has always been at the forefront of our industry and trying to make sure that we have sort of a varied season. But I think the tragic events that has happened over the past few months has also opened everyone's eyes up in the industry, that it's not just one person having these conversations anymore, but it's, as an industry, I think we're much more open to explore diverse composers. And so I think there's some programs in the season that I just think is very Detroit Symphony-esque, where I think we're pushing the envelope a little bit and just exposing audiences to some new music. The week with Christian Reif and Jenny Coe is one of those that stick out to me as just a really great program, because we were part of this co-commission consortium for Taishan Sori, New Jersey composer, who and great jazz musician as well, and he was writing a concerto for Jenny that was supposed to be premiered by New Jersey Symphony Orchestra. And we talked to them, and they allowed us to have the premiere this fall, so very thankful to them. And then we're pairing that with a string quartet by Florence Price, because we were supposed to do her third symphony in that week, because it was actually the 80th anniversary of the premiere of her third symphony, which actually happened in Detroit in 1940 at the DIA. It was part of the WPA under Roosevelt, and she was commissioned. It's a great story. So I was disappointed not to see that symphony happen. So hopefully we can do that next season. But so we're doing that prize, and then I don't remember how the suggestion came up, but I found out about this composer named Nokutula Ngwenyama, and just great composer. And she had this string quartet called Primal Message that was a really cool piece. And so I wrote to her and said, we would love to do this piece. And she said, I'm actually working on an orchestral version for this that would fit your instrumentation. So we're doing the two world premieres by two black composers in 1 week, and
that's awesome.
I think it's just a great program.
I feel like we've talked about this on our show and just in person a bunch, but I feel like as tragic as this is for everyone, and we couldn't play for so many months, in a weird way, it is possible for us to kind of reimagine the typical orchestral concert going experience in a lot of ways, and in this way it's kind of a opportunity to do that, doing different, like very different kind of music and different instrumentation, smaller instrumentation, and maybe it could, it's almost like a little experiment to see if this kind of concert experience it will be successful, which I'm really excited for.
Yeah, I mean, I think, as we talked about, orchestras plan so far in advance, right? So, some of the things that we were supposed to do this season, we started talking about 2 years ago, and then it doesn't happen, and you get kind of disappointed because you've been working so hard for it. But then you get like this moment where you're like, well, we could do something really cool right now and try it for this fall. I mean, it's going to be a different year for our whole industry, right? These are strange times. But I think there's also there's so many things that you can explore. How can you market all of this? I think orchestras in general has sort of had this fear of new music. And I'm not just talking about orchestras. I think we are, the orchestra musicians themselves and those of us that plan. But we sort of project onto our audiences that they have a fear for something that is not familiar. And I doubt that, because I think that especially the Detroit audience is very open to new experiences and to explore new music. And I think also with Yadra on board, who's obviously played a lot of music as a clarinetist in different orchestras, but a lot of the music that he's conducting is new, whether it's Tchaikovsky or Nukutulang Wanyama. He hasn't conducted it before. So from that sense, he's very open to trying these new concepts because it's all new from a conducting point to him. And so I think this is a moment in time where we can just try something different and have fun with it and sort of expose people to all kinds of music. I had this interview right before this one, and it was a great interview. But you sort of hover around a few pieces that people are familiar with, right? So tell me more about this Tchaikovsky serenade, or tell me more about Copland, Fanfare for a Common Man, and it's very understandable because we know those composers. We, as everyone knows, not everyone, but people know Tchaikovsky. And if you play Copland Fanfare for the Common Man, you might have heard it at 4th of July, or you might have heard it at some inaugural event, or at Olympics, what have you. But I think we forget sort of the larger question about, like, why are they familiar? They're familiar because we've decided that we wanted to make them familiar. So we keep programming them over and over again, and then they become familiar. And that has happened for centuries. It's not going to just change overnight. But I hope that one facet of what orchestras are for is to introduce new music. Whether that's new music that's written now or new music that is just new that we discovered. I knew some of Florence Price's works, but I hadn't explored her Third Symphony until I found out it was premiered in Detroit. And all of a sudden you listen to it and you go, this is a great piece,
Yeah.
And then you program it, and then you hope that others go, oh, Detroit programmed it, maybe we should program it too. And hopefully in 10 years it's familiar.
Standard, yeah.
Like that. That's always the goal. You never know how how everything will work out, but the idea is that you want to perform works that are interesting to the audience.
Oh, I like that a lot. The Detroit Symphony Orchestra, setting the trend.
That's right. It's our next slogan. We have a
setting the trend.
It's a line of slogans that we're working our way through. It's fifth in line.
Yeah. So Erik. And I'm sure everyone in the world really will never forget. I know I will not forget when that day that we decided to not work and cancel the rehearsal for that day and subsequently for the rest of the season. It was a very surreal day and rehearsal and I was just wondering if you could explain kind of what went on behind the scenes leading up to that decision, and maybe a little bit before, during, and after of what was going on.
Right, and also just if you could fill us in as well, just because I guess the purpose of that question is more of just, it's not just canceled. Like, there's all the stuff after things are canceled. You just had to cancel the season. Like, how does that even happen? Like, what do you have to do?
Right. Yeah, I mean, I remember the week before, and I can't remember exact dates, but I remember the week before I was actually in Berlin, and to see Jader. He was conducting over in Berlin, and we were going to talk a little bit about his program for the next season, for 21-22, and start thinking about that. And I remember being a little hesitant flying at that point, but it was more about like, oh, I hope I don't get stuck in Berlin because there's an outbreak and now I can't get back. And then I remember coming back and that Monday, because we were doing Carmina that week with Leonard, and rehearsals I think were starting either Tuesday or Wednesday, but that Monday I remember it was like the first case, the first couple of confirmed cases of COVID in Michigan, and then we started monitoring this because no one knew at that point exactly what this was, and we just had a classical roots gala. I mean, thank goodness that nothing happened, during that Saturday. And then I remember on Wednesday, we got some messages. The governor was holding some press conferences, but she wasn't at that point giving any clear directives. She was just making sort of these recommendations, but not as she later on, made very clear, stay at home or wear masks or all the other things. But at that point, it was a little bit vague, so we weren't quite sure we were sort of hoping that she was going to say one way or another, because it's always easier to work with directives than just a recommendation. And then so we started talking, and because we had a choir that week and we had soloists. And so I remember, and then that Wednesday, even though the first concert wasn't until Thursday night, that Wednesday was supposed to be an open rehearsal for our patrons. So there was 100, 150 people who were going to come and watch the rehearsal. And so that afternoon, we started talking to Leonard, who was conducting, and said, we're not quite sure. And he had some ideas. Maybe we could put the choir in the audience, and we could move some things around. But we knew nothing about the virus at that point, And so then we met with the orchestra committee, and we sort of, the orchestra committee, and talked through, like, what should we do? Should we move forward? We made the decision that we should cancel the open rehearsal. We didn't want to bring in any other people. But we had these thoughts that maybe we could get through the rehearsal on Wednesday night with the choir, and then make a decision on Thursday to see if we wanted to move forward with the concert, maybe without an audience, because we hadn't canceled the concerts yet. But maybe if we couldn't have an audience, we could at least webcast it. We could, do a concert without an audience, maybe figure out. And then I remember it just went very quickly that Thursday to where it was just, because we had talked to the choir on Wednesday and making sure everyone was comfortable. But then Thursday, it was like, someone, flicked the switch, and it was like, we can't do this. It was like that fast, and we just canceled, and we canceled that weekend's concert was the first thing that we did.
And I will say, for that concert, I don't think you could have fit any more people on stage, right?
No,
it was like
that was
completely
packed.
packed.
That was as packed as you can do.
Yeah. It was like the choir was taking up half, and then there was like so many musicians, and then it was just like, it was one of those concerts where it was just full.
Yeah. I mean, there was not chamber music that week. That's for sure. Yeah,
it's kind of crazy, because it's like we were going along at like our normal pace, 60 miles an hour, and then instantly zero.
Yeah.
And then like more recently, we kind of have to go 100.
Get
everything.
It's like it's crazy. And then like as when you schedule performances, when you book and you plan season, like the last thing you want to do is cancel. Like I can't remember. You cancel sometimes because of weather if you're outdoors, But I've had soloists cancel on me with like 12 hours notice, and you figure out a way to make the concert happen. You might fly someone in, you might do different repertoire, you might switch the program, but you don't want to cancel. Like it's I don't mind rescheduling, I don't mind postponing. But canceling is like the worst, because people bought tickets, they wanted to come to something, and now you say no. So I remember after that we decided we would cancel 2 weeks, just to figure out the situation, and then it quickly became sort of the rest of the season. And then you start, like I said before, like this whole industry and so many businesses is about relationships, so. Whether it's relationships between, staff and orchestra, or board and orchestra, and, but also all these external, colleagues that you have. I've known manager and artists in, New York and London. And so you get to know these people. And now you have to have these conversations saying, listen, we can't do concerts. Like, we are not allowed. I think in the beginning it was a little different, because people were like, I'm ready, I'm willing to come. I'm able to come to Detroit. But we had canceled. And then once it was clear that, we're not allowed, I think unlike other sort of the other crises that can be more local, because this was such a global pandemic, I think everyone felt like, all right, we're all in this together. Like, I would love to come there, but I know that it wasn't like I had to explain why. Like we can't even get into our building, at this point, let alone have an audience. So then you try to figure out, which artists could you try to reschedule, to any open weeks, for future seasons. Which ones have you had, you try to figure out what your relationship is with each manager and each individual, and sort of work it out and say, well, we'll try to find something in the future. We tried to figure out, because we obviously couldn't pay a lot of these people because, we didn't have any income. We weren't selling tickets. We didn't know what people were going to do with their tickets, if they were going to hold on to them or ask for refunds. So we said, but we tried to figure out, if someone had bought a plane ticket, if someone had applied for a visa, we were trying to make sure that, no one was out of pocket. And so it was a lot of conversations with a lot of people to make sure, to keep these relationships intact.
Yeah. It's also, I guess, it's a good way to get out of things that you don't want to do. It's like, oh no, I can't take you to the airport. I can't. We can't be in the same car together. It's like, that's like, it's like a good way to, at the very least, to have a good excuse to not do what you want.
I think people just understood in a different way. There's been instances where, you have a conversation with someone and then another artist say, I prefer not to work with this person, and that happens a lot in our industry, right? You say like, that might not be a good match, or I don't want to do that work by this composer, or like, yeah, it's not for me, see if you can find someone else. And you're sort of the mediator between that, and you're trying to figure out, okay, how can we make everything okay? But I think in this particular instance, it was like no one came back and said why, because it was just what was happening everywhere,
Right. Well, so how in the last few weeks in planning this season, at least for the fall, how are you able to get guest artists and conductors to agree to come in?
I think it has to do a lot with those. Yeah, I did not have to roll up my sleeves over Zoom. Like it was.
Right.
We tried to. When we looked at everything we were planning to do for the fall, we sort of laid out, what are some of our objectives with all of this. We want to keep everyone safe. We want to make sure that the orchestra and staff are try to do as little as possible in order for us to put on a season. We didn't want to have to cut the budget so much that we couldn't do anything. And we knew that we had all this, all these people who had bought tickets. So we had to figure out, okay, what can we provide to them? Because they have bought a ticket for a performance, or a subscription for this fall. So we said we have to do something. But I think what was different too was that on that list of these guidelines, one was to maintain artist relations, like guest artist and conductor and management relations. Because, I worked really hard to build these relationships over, many, many years. But also, I think it's, you can't just look at next season in isolation. You have to look ahead at some point, and hopefully it'll only be this season that will look and feel a little strange. But because it's just different. We're going to do great programs in the fall, but we all know it's going to be a different season, and that doesn't have to be bad, but it's going to be different. But then at some point we're going to be able to have more guest artists, larger programs, and hopefully we can announce the season, the 21-22 season in January, and people are would be excited to come back. And it's going to be it will be harder to have all the guests that are coming in for future seasons if you just sort of cut it right away, right now.
Right. Okay.
So I was trying to I built out everyone that was going to come for the fall, and sort of looked and said try to prioritize who to get to first to see, because we knew that we wanted to see Yader, but there were also some artists there that I wasn't sure was comfortable coming to Detroit, might not, be able to come to Detroit. So, and I sort of went down that list and talked to people, and what surprised me was that everyone, to, no exception, said that they wanted to come here. There were 4 artists that couldn't come on the classical season, and it all had to do with travel. So they either had, they were either based in Europe and couldn't come here, or were not comfortable coming here, or they had a string of performances in Europe right after our week and couldn't go back to Europe with enough time to quarantine. So, but everyone else was really excited, and I think part of that has to do with the unfortunate thing in our industry is that a lot of performances has had to be canceled with other orchestras. So a lot of artists, we know that soloists and freelancers and part-time musicians are really struggling during this time. We're fortunate to work for an organization that is really interested in keeping us all together. But I always say, like, the DSO, you have to sort of like put on your own oxygen mask first, right? Yeah. You have to sort of like make sure that your family, your immediate family, the staff and musicians are taken care of first. We had to figure that plan out first, and then we can sort of reach out to all our uncles and cousins in the industry, and composers and performers, and I think, I mean, you guys know it's like, I think people are just missing making music together, so I think when you offer them a chance to come and perform with the DSO, I think they're excited about it.
I definitely think that's another aspect of being in a symphony orchestra, though, is when you can have the guests, when you can have the guest conductors and the guest artists. That really helps us all grow and learn more, and able to play together in a more interesting and better way that's different from week to week, as opposed to
right.
The same thing over and over.
Yeah, and I think it's also, like we have, both Jean-Yves Thibaudet and Marc-André Mélin are gonna come here and actually perform chamber music. So we'll do the piano quintet, and we'll do Trout, with Marc-André. And I think that'll be great for a few people from the orchestra to like play chamber music with Jean-Yves and with Marc-André. So I think there are opportunities in this that could be really cool. And like, I think when we look at this too, when we look back at all the things that you guys did, during these past 4 or 5 months, right, with the Summer Institute and the Intermezzo and like this show and all these other cool initiatives. I mean, it'd be sad if it just stopped just because we went back to normal in the future, whatever that means, right? I think the same thing now is like, this could maybe open up a new way of how we program. So, I mean, if Jean-Yves Thibaudet or some other soloist comes to play a concerto in a future season, why don't we play some chamber music as well? I think we just haven't explored all of this because we're so busy. You're sort of part of that system. It's like, all right, now I'm done booking this season. Now you move forward, and you have to fit all of this in a very fast pace. And it's sort of, even though it's been crazy busy, it also, I think for all of us, as you start to stop and think a little bit about everything. It's like, could we do things differently? And why don't we continue this? I mean, musicians commenting on the Facebook, the watch parties, because you're not performing and now you're commenting on you, and you give shout outs to people in the orchestra. Like, as an audience member, as someone just seeing that, like, it's cool. Like, I like that. It's a different thing that, I don't think we would have had the time to think about during, if it wasn't for all this. So.
Yeah.
One note on that is just the experience of being on stage. What you might not know if you're watching us regularly is that we're constantly rooting for each other, like, to play even better. And then it's just like, oh yeah, that was such a great solo. And you don't get to see our reactions in that way. But now you kind of can in the comment section.
No, and it was like that Yader camp too. I think one part of the webcast thing too, I think is, the webcasts are interesting because it's like, when you go to a concert, you can look wherever you want, right? You sit in the audience and you can pick your seat depending on what you want. And if it's an oboe solo, I can choose to not look at the oboe, right? I can choose to like just pay attention to what someone else is doing, and that's kind of interesting in a way. And then when you watch a webcast, it almost becomes like, this is what you should look at right now, like this, because this is what's happening. And so you don't have the same amount of choice as a webcast viewer in some ways. On the other hand, when you see things like when you get to see Yader, I mean, unless you play in an auditorium where you have like choir seats in the back and you don't have a choir and you can actually see it from that angle, most orchestra hall audiences never gets to see what the conductor is doing, and so I think maybe we need to have more cameras on the horn sections and the cheering,
Uh-oh. You might see
I-
things you don't want to see.
Yes, I would vote against that.
I've seen the rehearsals. I agree.
I would like to pick my nose in privacy. Thank you.
Yeah. Scott rooting for everyone else on stage, but not the horns.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, and definitely not in the percussion section, please.
Yeah.
We use our instruments to hide mostly. Well, hey, Erik, thank you so much for joining us today. Really, it was really a pleasure talking to you and hearing behind the scenes what you do. It's awesome.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for
joining
joining us.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm really looking forward to this Alter season. Even though it's not traditional, I think in a lot of ways that could be kind of great. And I think I'm just excited to play. Period. But I'm excited to see. If how this will be with Detroit, and if people will like it there, and I'm sure they will.
Yeah, and I think it's I think the two things that's cool is it's the DSO. We always say no matter if it's 4 musicians or 10 musicians or 80 musicians, you guys are all the DSO. When you're on that stage in Orchestra Hall, that's the Detroit Symphony, and that's what you're gonna get this fall, right? And I think the fact that we have the opportunity to do webcasts because we've been doing it for so long. I mean, you can't just go and buy some cameras and start doing this. There's you've seen the production room. These are guys and girls who know what they're doing back there, And but I think it's also the live. I think that's I like that it's live because it is it's going to be a little strange not having an audience, and we're going to have to figure out what do we do at the end of the piece?
Eric,
when there's no
can you
applause.
just be in the audience, just one person?
Yeah, I'll just stand there. We can have the Major League Baseball. The virtual audiences in the hall.
Right. Like they're doing in the NBA games where people just they put their faces
you
in the
tweet
audience.
your face. Yeah.
I like the
I
Italian.
think
I like
but
the
I think the
Italian
live
opera
aspect
company
of it.
that had the plants in the audience. That was
Oh,
yeah.
great.
I like that art project.
Yeah.
Silence. Yeah. No, but I think the live thing is great. Because it is a different. Obviously you guys. And I know this. You feed off the audience, and that aspect is not going to be there. But I think there's also going to be that. We're playing together again. We're back in Orchestra Hall. I think it's going to be. I know I'm going to be emotional that first day, just being because it'll be 6-7 months since we last stepped foot on that stage, right?
Yeah.
And then to be able to do something live for Detroit, I think we had some interesting conversation about this. When you talk about it's scary, right? All of this, there's fear, especially in the beginning. I think we're sort of moving away from that a little bit. There's hope in the treatments and vaccines, and you start feeling that, but it's still a scary thing. And I think orchestras and other arts institutions, they do such a good job in trying to provide hope, to try to bring some of these people out of that place and want to experience something. And I think that live element to it, the fact that we're doing this live and that you can tune into it, I hope it brings some hope to people.
Definitely. And maybe instead of the plants in the audience, we could have Chrysler, Ford, GM cars in the audience and play for them, and just
that's perfect.
Just continue with the Motown theme.
Yeah, a little sponsorship too. A little product placement there.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, hey, thank you so much, man. It was great to see you and great to talk to you.
It's great talking to you guys.
Yeah. Talk real soon. See you real soon.
Yeah.
Thanks,
sounds
Erik.
good. Cheers.
Right.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to Between Two Stands. We're going to take a few weeks off, but we just wanted to say thank you so much for tuning in, and we appreciate all the support you've shown us over the past few weeks.
It has been such a wonderful surprise seeing how many of you have tuned in over the past few weeks to get to know us and the music a little better. We can't wait to get back to playing, and we look forward to bringing you more and sharing more with you soon.
DSO Digital Concerts begin on September 10th with our new music director, Yadar Benyamini, conducting the first 2 weeks of concerts. Get access to all DSO Digital Concerts by becoming a DSO subscriber or donor. Learn more at dso.org.